Ode on the Galactic History Channel, the first and only Terran War. We will examine the events leading up to the war and why it was the only war that was ever fought against Homo sapiens. They are known by a variety of names. Homo sapiens, humans, Terrans, or humanity as they call themselves, first arrived on the galactic stage 600 standard years ago. Their first contact was one of luck, as they arrived upon a council-compliant flotilla, as opposed to a non-compliant species. Following council procedures, humanity was gently welcomed into the folds of galactic community, avoiding first contact wars that other, less fortunate species have experienced at the hands of opportunistic, non-compliant species. In the beginning, humanity was allowed to join the Galactic Council as a simple member race. It would take the first and only Terran War before humanity became a true council member, with a permanent position on the council's Security Council. At first, humanity was viewed as skittish and overly polite. What was seen as simple post-contact stress became an enduring trait. Humanity went out of their way to appease every species, council-compliant allies, non-compliant friendly species, even simple trade partners. Ambassadors were extremely, painfully polite. They noticed every nicety and making sure to never, ever step on any toes. It is because of this that many species viewed them as spineless, fangless, and frail. Strangely, humanity seemed to revel this label. It is arguable that because of this prejudice, humanity was able to make so many allies and secure trade agreements. It was a time of great peace and prosperity, not only for humanity, but for council-compliant species. Humanity was able to become expert orators and negotiators, able to de-escalate many tense situations that threatened to become full-blown wars. To humanity, they called this period their New Pax Romana. Using their orator skills, they were able to greatly expand their own little space into the fourth largest empire in the galaxy, as well as one of the wealthiest. Unfortunately, like all things, it was to come to an end. The end of Peace 400, and 67 years after humanity's first contact, the Great Council Schism occurred. Several council-compliant species grew envious of amassed wealth and technological developments of several species, namely humanity. Seeing the council as a means to prevent less fortunate species from amassing wealth, they broke their compliance, labeled themselves as separatists, and declared war against the Terrans. Many species viewed humanity as weak-willed plutocrats, amassing wealth simply for the sake of denying it to others. Suddenly, humanity was facing the largest amassed military in the history of the galaxy, with nearly no support. This was a planned move, as the separatists knew that humanity's many allies would not risk a war of extermination. The human ambassador Li Wei-Tai made one last-ditch plea for peace. The humans offered a great bounty in the efforts to avoid war. Even when humanity offered to surrender all their colonies outside of their home system, Sul, the separatists refused them. Disheveled, tearing at her clothes and prostrating herself. Before the separatists' leadership, Tai cried, "I'm on my knees with tears in my eyes. If you fuck with us, we will kill you all." Her pleas fell upon deaf ears. The separatists saw the begging, pleading, and groveling as a sign of weakness, proof that any war would be a short and decisive one. Li Wei-Tai was escorted back to the human embassy to be kept as a political hostage, as well as the mouthpiece, to humanity's surrender. There, the embassy made one last transmission before it was cut off. Unleash Hades. At last, back to war, it is important to note that the separatists knew the history of the human race. It had been freely available since humanity's first contact. However, it was viewed as a wild fabrication, propaganda designed to improve humanity's standings with the galaxy. This was not unfounded. Many species used this tactic to either avoid war or push for more profitable trade agreements. They viewed humanity's supposed history of bloodshed as a laughable, outlandish boast. In the centuries they had known humanity, they had not been in one single war. Thus, in the eyes of the galaxy, humanity's history began with their first contact. Their history was peace and military avoidance. If it could not be verified, it was a wild boast. Also, the galaxy saw humanity as a single unified species, when in fact they were the opposite. It was a front. Humanity was divided into nation-states based on astrological location, each vying for power and prestige. Other species spoke as a unified front, but humanity could never meet that achievement. So they went with the next best thing, an appointed position. Each government voted who would be the voice of the supposed human race, while they were little more than figureheads. When news of their separatists desired war, the numerous nation-states were able to truly join together against a common enemy. Despite being at peace for over 400 years, humanity was not idle in their military. With each technological advance, weapons were developed, guns were tested and improved, ships were made bigger, heavier, with stronger shields and armaments. And the pride of Terra, the infantry, was continually augmented by these advances, and their training only grew more and more harsh and thorough as the peace endured. Said military was kept under tight wraps for centuries to give humanity the visage of a peaceful species. As the Terrans themselves explain it, this was their effort to get their shit together. During the Great Peace, the militaries and nation-states played zero-sum games within their expanding borders. This only reinforced the belief that humanity could not outgrow its violent roots, that the visage of a peaceful humanity was only that, a carefully crafted visage. So when every peaceful resolution was exhausted and war was declared, it was both bitter and sweet for humanity, for they knew that while they could not grow out of their violent ways, they could still revel in it. Culture swap any interaction between race, peaceful or not, is a lesson in culture. Values are demonstrated, ideologies are spread, and concepts are explained. And the first and only Terran War was no different. The Separatists believed that before humanity could mount a pitiful defense, they could conquer whole swaths of territory with little to no opposition. However, as soon as they met with the humans, they began learning a number of human values, ideologies, and concepts. The first value they learned was the concept of spite. Spite, as defined by humans, is the malicious ill will prompting an urge to hurt or humiliate. This was demonstrated by suborn, fierce resistance at every human settlement and colony. There were no mewling, craven cowards. Instead, there were populations with nothing but the irrational, illogical desire to hurt their attackers in any and all capacity. A prime example is on Nuevo Terra, where a mere 20 guerrilla fighters held off over 1,000 separatist troops in a single house. Led by the militia sergeant York Pavlov, the humans repulsed waves of infantry, tanks, and assault drones for months on end. It is important to note that the house held no significance to anyone in any way. It was neither a strategically positioned building, nor did it hold special significance for any human. Pavlov simply gathered his men and declared, "I don't care if this is the birthplace of religious icon's second coming or a fucking opium den. We ain't gonna let them have it." Fueled by sheer spite, they held true to their word. The Separatists never took the building. Separatist troops were caught in a quagmire. For every gain, they had very little to show for it. The expense of men, munitions, and material were simply not worth the advances. This was yet another concept the humans had: a Pyrrhic victory. Hades. Opens due to the nature of space travel and the size of humanity's empire, it took one standard year to fully prepare. But when human forces arrived, they mounted a fierce counterattack. Humanity was able to use their fragmented organization to their advantage. Instead of one political body, there were dozens of nation-states and thus dozens of individual military forces. 2 or 3 nation-states were assigned one theater of war. Therefore, the human counterattack was both savage and unpredictable, with each nation-state using different battle tactics. In one theater, humanity would counter with daring frontal assaults. In another, they outmaneuvered separatist troops and eliminate entire command groups with one vicious blow. Yet another nation-state would engage in a guerrilla war, making lightning-quick strikes before fading into the shadows. Humans called this asymmetrical warfare. Unlike every other species, they did not match might with might or speed with speed. They matched might to speed and speed to might. To the Terrans, symmetrical warfare was hopelessly obsolete, one that would lead to Pyrrhic victories. Asymmetrical warfare would only result in massive casualties to the enemy, and was thus a superior tactic. It took 4 standard months to utterly break and repel the separatist armada. This shocked the galactic community, who expected humanity to simply perish. With the armada routed, they expected that humanity would then sue for peace. Sadly, that was not the case. Yet some of the separatists fell back to their defense line to contemplate the future of the war. It was clear that they were not prepared for the brutal fighting humanity was capable of. Changes would be needed. While The Separatist military was planning. The Separatist leadership believed that the humans had used all of their might to simply push their forces back. Therefore, the human embassy held hostage in council space would be activated, and peace negotiations would begin. They were caught off guard when human armadas simultaneously arrived from warp travel at key Separatist stronghold planets. Showing a synchronization that few species were capable of matching, humanity launched a withering assault across all fronts, ready to show yet another human idea. Turnabout is fair play. To summarize the concept, if X am A, then A jamber X. The Terrans believed that since the Separatists attempted to commit genocide on them, it was perfectly fine to return the favor and commit genocide upon Separatist member races. There would be no surrender for the Separatists. When their forces surrendered, they were all killed to the man. No one was spared. With attacks being launched across all fronts, the Separatists were driven back. Humanity had introduced the galaxy to Blitzkrieg, roughly translating into the War of the Lightning. And it was terrifyingly effective. No one was safe, not even Janata. If there was one crown jewel of the Separatist defenses, it would be Janata. A barren world that could barely support life, Janata was a massive mineral-rich world and was quickly transformed into a military hub. Fleets, munitions, and troops were created and trained on Janata by the hundreds of millions. It was said that if black holes devoured the galaxy, Janata would fall last. The humans took this as a challenge. Armadas flooded the Janata system, overwhelming the defense grid and laying siege to the planet. While unleashing their orbital bombardment, Terran stormtroopers landed on the planet and began assaulting military bases. Again, and this bears, repeating, Terran ground troops began landing on the planet during orbital bombardment. With Separatist troops dug in, they were caught off guard by the stormtrooper assault. Within a standard week, Janata, the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy, fell. The loss of Janata is widely considered the death knell of the Separatists. Many of their top military minds were on the planet when the humans seized it, and were quickly executed. Turnabout, after all, is fair play. But while Janata fell, it alerted the Separatists. Armed with the knowledge of the humans' rapid assault, their homeworlds were able to ready themselves for the inevitable onslaught. The close of the war, the Separatists had been shocked by the humans twice over. The first was their valiant defense. The second was their incredible assault. They would not be shocked a third time. When the assaults began, they had their defense plans ready and were able to hold out. While the Terran military was able to establish sizable beachheads on the U.S. Serapardis' home planets, they were able to achieve little else. For nearly one standard year, humanity launched attack after attack, and for nearly one standard year, they were repelled. Even the venerated stormtroopers were unable to make headway against the Separatists. Each advance was stonewalled with troops that were fighting not for their lives, but for their species. The war appeared as a stalemate, with inconsequential advances and valiant defenses. The galaxy waited for a lawsuit for peace. If the humans had not shared their final concept to the galaxy, it might have come to that. In the end, humanity taught their last lesson: scorched earth. If humanity could not control the homeworlds of the Separatists, then no one would. On the final day of the war, the humans retreated, and several nuclear devices were detonated on the homeworlds of the Separatists. Colloquially called super nukes, or planet crackers, by the humans, they were several thermonuclear devices wrapped around layers of purified elements. When heated by the fusion bombs, the elemental layers reached critical temperatures, fusing into francium, an element so radioactive it dissolves itself. The maximum half-life of the element is less than 1 standard half-hour. Added to a thermonuclear detonation, francium dissolves even faster, boosting the yield 1,000-fold. Coupled with the efficiency of the thermonuclear devices, upwards of 75% of all fusible materials were able to fuse. They were able to unleash enough energy to destabilize a planet's core. Buried miles into a planet's crust, the super nukes were able to breach the planet's cores. Most planets simply cracked under the terrifying power, further torn apart by the gravity of their stars and moons into asteroid belts. The only planets that did not share the fate of the home worlds were the ones that humanity was able to totally and completely purge of Separatist life. Planets were reduced to empty shells as humanity returned the favor to the Separatist scum. The Stoxiarq, Frege, Ketesh, and Antoni were outright slaughtered, butchered to the last. The Neonan, Iowun, and Azithi had members of their race. that survived, but their population was reduced well below the minimum viable population threshold. Their species were doomed to extinction as there were not enough members to continue breeding. Only the Obosa and the Yuzari truly survived the first and only Terran War. They survived by luck and luck alone. The remnants of their empires were far-flung mining colonies nearly lost in the far rim. But their populations were so drastically reduced, they were deemed endangered species by the Council. They would remain endangered for nearly 200 years. After the loss of their home, worlds, the remnants of the Separatists begged to surrender unconditionally. The human embassy at the heart of the Council was activated, and for the first time in over 2 standard years, they were allowed to leave, no longer hostages, but the speakers of a mighty species. General Ophis, one of the last 12 surviving. Yowen in the galaxy berated humanity as they signed the surrender. He harangued them, calling them monsters of the highest caliber. Ambassador Li Wei-Tai, stone-faced and somber, replied, "We are not monsters. We are death, the destroyer of worlds." The 3-month rebellion, with the surrender signed, the war, was over. But to some humans, they thought it was only a brief interlude. 3 human nation-states banded together, named themselves the Federation, and called for a galaxy-wide crusade. It was humanity's manifest destiny to control the stars and put to the sword all who resisted. While the galaxy was not familiar with the human idea of manifest destiny, they were endlessly horrified of another war with the humans, fearful that the fate of the Separatists, but humanity disagreed with itself, and several nation-states banded together to fight their insurgent cousins. Within days of ending a war, the galaxy watched, amazed, as humanity warred with itself. The galaxy held its breath as human fought human, leaving millions dead. But the Federation was slowly pushed back to their home worlds, where they were put to siege. After 3 standard months, the Federation surrendered. Humanity was lauded for restraining themselves and made a full council member with a permanent position on the Security Council. Such was the relief of the galaxy that many council members pushed to have humanity lead the council to safeguard all intelligent life in the cosmos. Yet again, humanity surprised the galaxy. The war was over, and the prevailing desire of humanity was to return to simpler times. Their fear, Ambassador Li Wei-Tai explained, was that they would grow too accustomed to the power they wielded, and even more nation-states would grow arrogant and greedy, such as the short-lived Federation. While there could be no going back in time for humanity, they proved their resolve and returned to the role of simple traders, orators, and negotiators. However, whenever a political situation escalated, when one species grew jealous and resentful of others, and war appears to be the only outcome, humanity would offer the aggressor a bounty of goods. Aggressors now understand that it is not a desperate attempt to avoid war, but rather a final warning. If you fuck with us, we will kill you all. Humanity only offered this a dozen times, but every time it was offered, the aggressor quickly accepted the terms. The Separatists might be dead, but the thoroughness of their destruction is something that could never be forgotten. It is because of their utter destruction that there has only been one war with humanity. Start new amazing story. They can't do this. It's disgraceful. I mean, a human? What could he have possibly done besides being exceptionally average in every conceivable manner? General Karna, it was nearly unanimous in the Senate. I think you're just jealous someone else is going to be in the limelight for a change. But 2 in the same century, and to a human no less. Honestly, they're handing them out to anyone now. What next? They're going to give one to a Lethan for getting above-average scrap in his junk scavenging quota? Well, before you come to your conclusions too quickly, General, let's at least give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this human was slightly above average. Ambassador Calix chuckled. But I do agree, it's far too soon. I mean, 11 medals in 5,000 years, and we get to witness 2 in our lifetime? Regardless, I am happy for another holiday being added to the human calendar on the dreadful occasion that I have to work with them again. General Karna grumbled as they made their way down the red carpet that stretched up the steps of the Great Hall. General Karna was greeted with a spectacular fanfare of music and cheers as he stepped through the entryway. As the last recipient of the Galactic Honor Medal, he would be one of the guests of honor for the ceremony. Just yesterday, he turned down the offer to be the one to personally gift the medal to the human, saying his presence alone would be enough of an honor. He made his way to his seating near the front of the opulent awards hall and took his place near the podium. In his seat was a small paper-bound book titled The Escado Conflict, a First-Hand Account. He picked up the volume with a grumble so he could sit down. Why did they think he wanted to waste his time with reading about Escado? He personally peer-reviewed countless publications on the military strategy and political consequences of Escado. He was sure he could retell the statistics and strategy of the Escado conflict better than any mere foot soldier on the ground. Seeing the Great Hall decorated for a galactic honor medal was an opportunity very few would get to witness in their lifespan. And here he was, seeing it all over again, but this time it wasn't adorned for him, but for some pitiful human. The massive banners that bore the insignia of his species' last ceremony had now been replaced with the emblem of the humans. It seemed rather distasteful to have his beautiful banners replaced with something so minimalist. The Great Hall had the capacity for nearly 1 million spectators from hundreds of different species, and for the second time in a century it was completely full. Once the remaining important dignitaries, ambassadors, and political and military leaders found their respective places, the ceremony began. The leader of the Terran Republic made their way on stage and gave his opening remarks. Nothing really worth paying attention to. General Karna was more focused on the empty seat near the podium, hoping to get a look at this supposed above-average human. He wanted to witness the man for himself and see what could be so special about him. Confusion was spreading across the crowd once more, and more people took notice of the strangely empty seat. This human is giving me more and more reasons to dislike him. I mean, not showing up to his own galactic honor ceremony? That should be a crime if you ask me, General Karna said to the ambassador seated next to him. Perhaps they have some grand entrance planned. Leave it to the humans to be overly extra. With their presentations, they don't even have the decency to adhere to millennia of traditions. Well, if it gets any worse than this, they'll ensure they're never given the opportunity to earn another. Which is fine by me. After the usual introductions and dreadfully boring formalities of starting the ceremony, General Karna finally blessed the speaking human with a modicum of attention. For over 5,000 years, the Galactic Honor Medal and its recipients has stood as a beacon for all of our members in service, from any origin or species. It represents something that anyone can strive to achieve, and to be the change that would impact the galaxy for the better. It is reserved for individuals who display acts of valor that save the lives of millions, whose actions single-handedly change the course of history as we know it, and whose displays of courage are to be remembered and appreciated by all. With this in mind, it is my hope that today we shall remember a soldier who has given more to the galaxy than anyone presently in this room. General Karna rolled his eyes at the last remark, thinking that it might have been somewhat directed at him. This human probably did not have the slightest comprehension of what he had to do to earn his. A soldier whose acts of uncontested bravery may be an example for all to strive for in their military service. United Terran Army Private John William Ringett has distinguished himself from his peers by going above and beyond anything expected of him when he entered service to the Galactic Republic 1 year ago, and it is with great sadness that he is not present with us today to receive this honor in person. General Karna leaned over, whispering again, "Oh, I'm sure he has much more important things to do right now, but I guess desecrating the prestige of the most important award in the galaxy is pretty paramount." Ambassador Calix gave a small laugh. And they referred to him in the past tense, as if he is someone different now and is no longer the same. Human who earned this award? Private John William Ringett graduated from the Terran Infantry Academy and Orbital Strike School, and immediately was sent to Escado to take part in the large-scale stabilization operation there. At 17 years of age, he left Earth and was dropped into one of the most hostile zones on the planet. After 3 months of fighting on the surface of Escado, it was seen as a losing battle, and his squad was issued an evacuation order. They were told to depart from the planet and leave it to its destruction. At around 1800 hours on the 7th of June, Terran Standard Time, his squad made the executive decision to stay behind to ensure the evacuation of Escadian civilians. At the time, they did not know it, but they were escorting the very last members of the Escadian species. Upon this revelation, though filled with countless people, the room had grown completely silent. Many had heard of the tragedies on Escado, but until now, none had known just how severe the circumstances of the war had been, and how close the species was to complete extinction. His squad secured the only remaining spaceport on the planet. and started the evacuation of the civilians. However, at the time of arrival, only 3 of the squad of 9 remained. His 2 squad mates, Staff Sergeant Andrew Miller and Technical Sergeant Brian Jones, took control of a military transport and set to bring the civilians out of the war zone. As they prepared to start the evacuation, they became aware of an enemy battalion expeditiously advancing towards the last remaining entry tunnel. Private John William chose to stay behind to ensure the safety of his squad and the civilians, in the hope that he could buy time for their withdrawal. Before their departure, Private John Williams sealed the doors to the facility and set up a hasty defense in the tunnel. At 2,000 hours, a battalion of enemy combatants aided with multiple military support vehicles began to assault the facility, set to ensure the complete extermination of the Ascadian people. Private John William placed himself between the attackers and the entrance door at the end of the tunnel and attempted to stave them off. Ignoring insurmountable odds, Private John William continued to fight in an unwinnable battle against an unending enemy opposition. Beset by an endless barrage of machine gun fire and plasma fire, Private John William held the line for the 4 hours it took to evacuate the civilians. It took nearly 3 trips to transport all of the citizens from the port. When they began their transport trips, military forces had already completely withdrawn from the surface of Escido. As the final soldier on the front lines in the Escido conflict, Private John William gave the ultimate sacrifice, knowing that there would be no reinforcements and no evacuation for himself. For his utmost bravery and courage in the face of an indomitable enemy, his actions reflect the highest glory upon himself and his unit. For his service on Escido and to the galaxy, Terran Republic Private John William Ringette is awarded the Galactic Honor Medal. Let it be known, a soldier does not have to return from a conflict to be recognized as the pinnacle of military valor. Private John William is the first individual to posthumously receive the Galactic Honor Medal. In your seats, you will find his personal diary of his time on Escido, published at his last request. It was his hope that the tragedy that transpired on Escido is never forgotten to history, and his first-hand account aids in making that possible. When his speech ended, the Great Hall did not cheer nor celebrate as it had for past ceremonies. No extravagant light display or confetti decorated the Great Hall and dazzled the spectators with the glory of the recipient as it normally would. The human speaker merely placed the medal atop an empty wooden casket that was hidden behind him and departed from the stage. The long and drawn-out tradition of handshakes and exquisite feasts did not follow the ceremony. What followed was a procession of delegates and dignitaries paying respects to the empty casket that symbolized the recipient of the award. General Karna looked down at the paper-bound book that was still in his claws, regretting that he was so quick to dismiss it earlier. He made a note to take the day off tomorrow so he could read it in its entirety. He walked up the stage and made his way towards the simplistic wooden box. He was not entirely sure what its purpose was, but it seemed to be something reserved for a solemn affair. After waiting in the line of people placing gifts and colorful flora from various worlds around it, it was his turn to pay his respects. Inside was a flag, a pair of small metal tags with human writing stamped into them, and the medal, which would normally be the center of attention. However, this piece of metal seemed rather minuscule in comparison to what it represented. He stood over the box and placed his clawed hand on the side of it. "Do you have anything to give, General?" asked Ambassador Calix in a small voice. "Nothing." That would do him justice. Only my condolences and apologies for how I composed myself earlier. I suppose this human was above average after all, but I now feel that would be quite an inadequate way to describe him. General Karna sat in his office. The floor-to-ceiling window that lined the far wall displayed a sprawling metropolis that sat at the galactic core. He looked down at the book resting in his claws, reading the title again, The Escido Conflict, a First-Hand Account, written by Private J.W. Ringette. After witnessing the award ceremony the day prior, he had decided to pick up what would be his first piece of human literature. He really was looking forward to seeing that particular human yesterday, but at the time, it had been for the wrong reasons. Now, he had a different rationale for wanting to meet him, but that would not be possible. As meaningful as the ceremony was, the actual speech had been rather brief. Before attending, he would have been glad if someone told it would be short. He now knows that such a brief recollection of events did not do this human's actions justice. He remembered his own acceptance speech being nearly 3 hours long and included various celebrations throughout as he covered every detail of his command decisions during his tenure in the Outer Belt Rebellion. But this award had differed greatly from every other galactic honor medal that had been given. This was the first time it had been given to someone who was not an officer, and not even a non-commissioned officer at that. This wasn't given to someone who had the luxuries of a command post off-world in a pristine office or a comfortable room aboard the galaxy's strongest dreadnought. This was given to someone who had been in the dirt and the mud and the blood, one who had seen the worst the galaxy has to offer and made something that mattered out of it. He poured himself a glass of methane-infused tea and leaned back in his chair, curling his scaled tail into a comfortable position. He opened the book and began to read the words written by the recently deceased soldier. Below are excerpts taken from The Escado Conflict, a first-hand account, written by Galactic Honor recipient Private John William Ringett during his short time on Escado. Additional quotes are sourced from surviving Escado soldiers and Terran military documents, along with statistical analyses of the conflict. February 28, 2287. Terran Standard Calendar. I wasn't always sure what I was going to end up doing. I mean, I knew I'd join the army, my dad was in the army, and his dad before him, and so on, but I didn't know exactly what I would end up doing, if that makes any sense. 20 years with no combat, a boring desk job after 10. Where's the fun in that? I wanted to do the things that kids read about in history books growing up. That's why I chose the infantry. I thought about the Navy too. Loved pirates since I was a kid. Hell, I still am a kid. Maybe I joined to stand out, get noticed, which is pretty damn hard when you got 15 brothers and sisters all under the same roof. I joined up as early as I could, got my parents to sign the forms at 17, and a few months later, I found myself here, at Fort Benavidez. Training isn't bad, but sure was harder than running track for my high school back in Boston. Met some great guys here, only a few of us got an OD slot. Never thought I'd get the chance to see some action so early, but I've always wanted to do the things that a soldier's supposed to do, so this is my chance. We get our duty stations tomorrow. All but a few of us are going to Escado. All the boys are excited, talking about all the aliens that they're gonna kill. I'm one of the ones that got an OD slot, so I'll actually get a real fucking combat. Jump. My brother is going to be so jealous when I get back with an orbital strike combat patch. March 2287. Easy Co. 395 class consisted of 235 infantry graduates. 198 of them were sent to Escado, all ages 17-20. Only 26 survived. E395 in. Training Co. March graduates, 2287, March 7th, 2287. Terran Standard Calendar. Well, I passed orbital drop school. It was everything that I was expecting it to be, and more. A welcome change of pace compared to infantry school, though. The food was better, we ran a lot more, which was fine by me. It was funny finishing all the runs minutes ahead of the other. Guys, I just sat there yelling at them, cheering them on when they passed the finish line. Sometimes the Black Hats would talk to me to pass the time, other times they just said good job and left it at that. I wasn't really looking for their validation, but it was cool to get it. Guess all that time I spent running finally paid off, which is a good feeling. They say we're going to be at Escado in less than a week. I'm getting nervous as it's getting closer. I mean, this is the first war that we've been in for almost a century. I finally understand how those soldiers felt back during D-Day and World War II. I wonder what it's like off-world. I don't know much about Escado, but I think I remember some other guys saying it's cold. We've only been involved with all these different aliens for a few years, and we're already getting into a fight. I'm no politician, but I'm not sure that's a great look for intergalactic politics, if you ask me. Oh well, all I gotta worry about is the cold, and I don't do well with the cold. But I guess it's my job to be uncomfortable. Now, I just gotta embrace it. During Escado, our paradroppers had a 75% fatality rate. If they survived entry, then they were often killed before joining up with their squad. 60% of paradroppers had less than 3 months of training. LT Colonel Mickey Hayes when asked about Escado paradroppers. March 12th, 2287. Terran Standard Calendar fuck today was surreal. It honestly felt like a dream. Maybe fever dream would be the better way to describe it. We were all crammed into that shuttle when we reached orbit. We couldn't see outside to know what was going on, just had to trust our pilot to get us over the drop zone. We had a shaky entry, and the shuttle sounded like it was going to tear itself apart. We all lined up at the door as we felt the dropship heating up. Once we got the go-ahead, we were pushed out the door one by one. I looked up to see the shuttle itself nearly melted as the last few almost made it out. Then I got my first look. At Hokkaido, I saw the vast white expanse of ice and rocky hills that littered the landscape. Fuck, guess I'm fighting on Hoth. That's a cool way to look at this. Some cities were visible in the distance, but the biggest thing I noticed was the tracer fire. Well, I thought it was tracers. Turns out that was superheated plasma. Other shuttles weren't as lucky as ours, and several other paratroopers pulled. Too early, and their chutes got burned up by some stray shots. I waited for my altimeter to start beeping before I pulled the chute, just like I'd been trained. I hit the ground. I'd done 2 drops before, but fuck, landing on rocks hurts a lot. More than soft grass. There wasn't any cover around, but thankfully I was in a pretty secluded area. I pulled out my Terra map and started making my way to the rally point. As much as I loved rucking, I wasn't too keen on walking 12 miles in an active war zone all by myself. Oh, well, just gotta embrace it. I got to the patrol base a few hours ago, chafing like a motherfucker and just wanting to stop walking. We had most of the platoon out here by the time I arrived. I had never actually met them before today. They didn't say much in the shuttle, but they said there was supposed to be a lot more of us. We holed up in the snow that night. I was thankful that we got issued the Arctic dropsuit for this, and yet my hands are still trembling from the cold as I hold this pencil right now. Yay! It was about 40 during the day to maybe 80 at night when I was on Hokkaido. Yay Celsius, so I guess that's around 100 for you Americans. I remember sometimes someone would get shot and they wouldn't bleed. Come to find out, the blood in the wound had already frozen solid the second it touched the air. SGT Takeshi Tiny Man Munamori when recalling Hokkaido. March 14th, 2087. Terran's standard calendar. I killed one today. Well, I think I did. I shot one today might be a better way to say it. To be honest, it was kind of hard to tell. He was so far off in the distance and wind really whipped around the snow, so it was really hard to see anything. The thermal goggles barely even worked after 100 meters. He was running across a road maybe 500 out. I took the shot and he fell down, but slowly dragged himself to his feet. I think I was too stunned to shoot him a second time. I don't know why I didn't, but it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. Didn't feel like anything, but it's not like I was looking him in his eyes when I shot him. Do they even have eyes? Maybe they have something entirely different. Other than that, I still don't know what they look like. It looked tall. I think they're supposed to be reptilian, or maybe amphibian. Don't quote me on it. I'm not a biologist. That was really all that happened today. PL says we're heading into a town here soon to look for signs of civilians. I wonder what the Ascadians look like. I guess technically that's why I'm here, for them that is. It's just weird thinking that I'm supposed to be here to save a species that I've never seen or heard of before. And now I'm fighting a species I've also never seen or heard of, until I shot one. For many in Hokkaido, this was their first experience off-world. At the time of the conflict, only the most privileged and elite had been able to travel to other systems. Many who joined the war effort came from families who could not afford to go off-world, hoping for a chance to see the stars. They had no way of knowing just how brutal Hokkaido would be. Quote from Political Inequality in a Galactic World by Meijay Matt Anderson. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.